Again, like always, appreciate you guys coming out. Also appreciate the beautiful weather that we got today. Just quickly, players of the game from last week. On offense, we ended up going with our offensive line. Really all the guys that played. So Will Fries, Steven Gonzalez, Des Holmes, Michael Mennett, Mike Miranda, C.J. Thorpe, and Rasheed Walker. You know, Des Holmes being able to rotate in and play this year, I think that's been really valuable for us. And then obviously the same thing, being able to rotate C.J. Thorpe and Mike Miranda, who probably played his best game on Saturday. I think that's been valuable. Sitting in practice on Sunday, kind of looking at who are those next wave of offensive linemen that we'll be able to do that with for next year. Guys that may or may not be starters will be able to rotate in. I think that's been valuable for us this year. On defense, Micah Parsons, and on special teams, Jake Pinniger. So really appreciative and proud of those guys. Getting into Ohio State, obviously, Ryan Day has done a great job. Excited about the matchup. We've obviously had great games. The last three matchups have been decided by really talking 5 points. 5 points. And then if you go all the way back to even 2014, the year that they won the national championship, our first year, took them to double overtime, if I remember correctly. So, we've had a lot of competition with these guys. We've played them probably as well as anybody over that period of time. But obviously, not good enough. We got to take the next step. So, but I've known Ryan for a long time. Got a lot of respect for Ryan. I think he's doing a really good job. So happy for him. Kevin Wilson, offensive coordinator, although Ryan Day calls the offense, Kevin has got the title, and obviously Kevin's got a tremendous amount of experience as a head coach in this conference, as an offensive coordinator in multiple different conferences, and very, very respected as a football guy. Scheme, they're predominantly 11 personnel team, probably about 75% of the time. They'll also mix in some 12 personnel, and then they get in multiple different formations to run, whether it's zone read or their stretch read, both weekend strong, and then some of the split flow zone. They thrive on explosive plays at the quarterback position. In the passing game, obviously running back is having a tremendous year, the tight ends as well, but they are explosive. As explosive as any offense in the country. Been impressed with their offensive tackle, Thayer Munford, who we recruited, is really playing well for them. Justin Fields, who we know extremely well, is doing great for them. His touchdown to interception ratio is really impressive, obviously. J.K. Dobbins, we recruited him as well. Very, very impressed with him and what he's been able to do this year, really over his career. And then their wide receiver number 17, Chris Olave, is doing a really good job as well. There's a number of guys. Obviously, whenever you point out a few guys, there's other guys that you could mention too. And then on defense, they got co-coordinators in Greg Madison, who's been doing it for 43 years and been very successful both in the NFL and in college. And then Jeff Hafley as well. Known Jeff, for a long time, and has had a really good career. Obviously, those two guys have made a significant impact for them defensively this year. They're a base 4 down front. Coach Johnson does a great job with their D-line. That continues to be the case this year. Their D-line sets the tone for their whole defense. Where they are different is they're predominantly a middle of the field closed defense this year. They're going to have a safety in the middle of the field almost all the time, which is somewhat unusual now in college football. But they're going to play some variations of one high, whether it's cover 3, whether it's cover 1, whether it's pressure, whether it's man pressure, whether it's zone pressure. They do a really good job of disguising it. It all starts out kind of looking the same, and then they allow those guys to play fast. Obviously, Chase Young is back just in time for good old Penn State, and obviously very impressed with him. Known Chase know his uncle, known Chase for a long time. Obviously is as impressive as a player on tape in the country. Before the games he missed, people were talking about him for the Heisman and things like that. So he jumps off the tape at you. And then we've been impressed with number 39, Malik Harrison, their linebacker, as well as their corner, number 1, Jeffrey Duca. But again, there's a bunch of guys that you could point out, so it's hard singling out a few guys. And then on special teams, Matt Barnes has done a nice job. They've been good on special teams for a long way. He's kind of taken over. They continue to play a similar style on special teams. Matt was with Tyler Bowen at the University of Maryland a few years ago, and is doing a good job. The guys that jump out to you is their kicker, number 95, Blake Hallbeal, if I'm saying his name correct. If not, I apologize. Running back number 30, Demario McCall, that they use in the return game. And then also wide receiver number 17, that we already talked about, Chris Olave, and then Seven Banks, number 12, those are the guys that jump out to you on film. So obviously great challenge, going on the road in a venue that holds over 100,000. We obviously know home field advantage that comes from those type of environments. Probably the most talented roster we watched on tape, definitely this year, maybe since we've been here. And it's going to be a great challenge. I know our guys are excited about it. Practice today will be important, and then I'll get a chance to visit with you guys tomorrow after practice as well, and have a better idea of how we looked. But I know our guys are excited about it. I know our coaching staff's excited about it. We're going to have to go in and play well on the road against a really good ranked opponent.
Start with Bruce Scarsella, Ready Eagle.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Rich. How are you?
I'm good. James, about an hour ago, Sean Clifford told us that he received death threats after the Minnesota game. And I was just wondering, did he tell you? Were the authorities contacted? And what does that say about fans and social media in general?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of it, but yeah, I was involved in it. I would hope I'm involved in any of these types of things where our players need support, and then we make sure they get the right type of support. But yeah, I was trying to be, and my wife told me I wasn't so subtle after the game, but when I was thanking the positive, loyal fans, that's what I was trying to do a little bit. I don't know. I don't know where we are as a society. It's concerning. We're 9-1. We're ranked, in the top 10, I think. We've had a pretty good year based on most people's standards. And sometimes you go on social media and you wouldn't feel that way. And the fact that our players are having to deal with stuff like this. I think before I got here, we had a little bit of an issue with Sam Ficken. And I see it's not just our fan base, it's all over. I think a little bit of going to this playoff model that we're in now, I think has had an impact on it a little bit. I think the fact that everybody kind of has a voice and everybody has the ability to contact others, it's concerning. But I don't know if I necessarily have the answers, but it's concerning, and you see it everywhere. And we laugh about it, not this incident, but I think the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and the next game at halftime they're getting booed. And we laugh about those types of things, but I don't know. It's just, I don't know if I have an answer for it, but it's troubling. There's no doubt about it. It's troubling. I think it's concerning for all of us. And I think that's sometimes where, where I maybe get upset sometimes, and maybe I shouldn't, and ask you guys some questions. But that's kind of where these things are coming from. I know the power that you guys have, and I'm I don't want you guys to take it the wrong way. I'm just saying that's kind of where we are right now. Things get extreme. So, you know, you hate to see it, but you know, the sad thing, it's a part of our reality of our society right now. You see that in a lot of areas. And the last thing I want to do is get into other things besides football right now. But you see a lot of things that are behaviors in our society now that we accept that I don't know why we're accepting. You know, you see some things from a violence perspective. You see some things that people in positions, how they're conducting themselves. Just a lot of things that we're accepting in our society that we would never have accepted before. The things that parents have to worry about kids going to school, elementary schools. It's just concerning, you know. So obviously football is just a very, very small piece, but I do think it's a microcosm of a lot of other issues that show up in our society. And I'm not sure why we accept it, or I'm not sure why we think it's okay, whether you've had, you know, 14 Budweisers or not. I don't see why it's okay or acceptable.
Derek McGar, school spare times leader.
Hi, James. How are you today?
Hey, Derek.
James, how early in the recruiting process did Justin Fields come on your radar? And what were your first impressions of him from film and then from meeting him in person?
Yeah, you know, obviously we were involved with him early and, you know, had a significant relationship for a long time. So, you know, obviously very talented guy. You know, in terms of you come up with your list of things that you're looking for in terms of, you know, characteristics, you know, height, weight, speed, intelligence, you know, release, accuracy, touchdown to interception ratio, win-loss percentage, all the things we look at when we're evaluating and studying quarterbacks. You know, watching them in games, watching them in practice, watching them throw live. They checked a lot of boxes. And based on what I'm seeing on film right now, I think we were right. It's pretty good.
Mark Wilgimich, Downtown Morning Call.
Hi, James.
Hey, Mark.
Sorry about that. What is your sense this week regarding KJ Hamler's availability?
Yeah, like I said last week after the game, we're hopeful. Obviously, you know, we won't know. There's medical policies and procedures that we go through, and you know, we got to go through a series of steps and things like that. But we were hopeful after the game. I still remain hopeful, but those decisions, you know, I don't make. I won't make them now, and I never have, you know, since I've been at Penn State. So, you know, we'll wait and see. But we were hopeful after the game. I still remain hopeful. But again, you know, the medical professionals make those decisions.
Frank Bodani, your Daily Record.
Hi, James. Good afternoon.
Hey, Frank. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, thanks. Ohio State will be your third straight opponent that's exceptional at throwing the football. What do you see as maybe the biggest issue or struggle you guys have had with Minnesota and Indiana in terms of passing?
Yep. Yeah, I think, you know, to your first part of your statement there, yeah, I think you know, you look at, you know, our 4-game stretch or whatever it's been, you know, I don't know if there's you know, if anybody's looked at this, but I don't know if there's been another team in the country that's played a 4-game stretch like this. I think we've had the 4th toughest schedule in college football. So, you know, this is obviously another challenge, and a team that throws the ball extremely well. You know, a couple things. You know, obviously, you know, first of all, you got to give Minnesota and Indiana credit. Really good job at the quarterback position. Really good job from a scheme perspective and from a talent perspective. Obviously, all those things will be heightened this week. There's no doubt about that. But also, we haven't helped ourselves. I mean, there's been some times where we've blown coverages. You know, the reality is that happens with everybody. We've been unfortunate at times we've blown coverage. We've gotten burned. We've gotten caught for it. We have to eliminate those things as coaches. We got to eliminate those things as players, and you got to give those guys credit for being able to take advantage of it. You know, when we did, obviously, critical times magnifies it as well. But those things have showed up. There's no doubt about it, and it's a trickle down effect. You know, you may have a linebacker that misaligns, which affects the safety, which now affects the corner. One issue impacts the other, and vice versa. So, that's what this week of preparation is about. We're going to have to match their confidence on Saturday, and we're going to have to match their playmaking ability. That's going to be critical.
Joe Giuliano, Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, Joe. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, thanks. And you?
Good. Yeah, really good.
Good. Talk often about the importance of fundamentals and taking care of the little things. And I was just wondering how you feel that's gone this season, being 9-1. Do you feel like you're doing the little things better? And how important, obviously, is that on Saturday against a skilled team like Ohio State?
Yeah, I think overall, if you went from game one to this point, I think yes. You know, we've done a good job of that. Obviously, there's been some points where it has jumped out in certain games. But again, I think if you look at it overall, good. I mean, you look at last game, we had one penalty in the game, and played pretty clean from an assignment standpoint, but we had a couple that are critical errors that jump out at you. So there's no doubt about it. But again, you can't allow one or two critical errors to taint you as a head coach in where we're really at. But there's no doubt about it. We got to fix those things. But yeah, I mean, we had one penalty in the game. You know, even that one, it's kind of an interesting call. What I like is each week I turn in the penalties, and more than anything, I want to make sure that I clearly understand the rules the way I understand them, so that I can have the discussions with the staff and make sure we're all on the same page on how the rules are enforced or interpreted, and then do the same thing with the players. So on that pass play, for you to get called for grounding, you have to be conserving time or conserving yardage. So if they feel like you threw it away because you were under duress, or we're trying to conserve time, then it's a flag. It's a total judgment call. And I actually agree with it during the game because there was no one there. Now, it was an option route. Sean was expecting a post. The receiver ran a corner. Where I disagree is I don't think he was under duress in the pocket. So I'm telling that story because I think that's an example of the discipline. But the discipline is also being in the gap you're supposed to be in the run game. Being in coverage where you're supposed to be if you're a half-field responsibility or whatever it may be, or man coverage on number 2 or number 3. It's making sure in the run game when we're going on a combination block that the entire O-line and tight ends is coordinated, so our double teams are going to the right people, so we don't have 2 different double teams going to the same linebacker and leave a linebacker unblocked. That's discipline as well, all those communication things that are going on. So I think overall good, but we've had 1 or 2 mistakes per game that we got to get cleaned up. And obviously the better opponent you play, and the more talented they are and things like that, it magnifies. There's less room for those types of errors. So that's what this week needs to be about.
Mike Gross, Lancaster Newspapers.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey, Mike.
My comment was done a better job than usual of asking questions.
Took all your questions?
Yeah.
All right, it's good talking to you, Mike. I'll talk to you next week.
I noticed that Dan Johnson was not on one of the finalists for the walk-on player award, and earlier this week it was announced that there were a bunch of tight ends announced for that John Mackey award, and Fryer wasn't one of them. And I'm not suggesting that either of those things are particularly important, but is there a lack of individual recognition for this team for some reason? Do you sense that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to be the biased head coach at Penn State and try to look at it from a big picture perspective. I think, when I get calls about things like that, I'm quick to throw praise at other teams in our conference or other people that we played, and I'm not sure if everybody does that, but we do that. And I also try to look at our guys. I can't imagine that there's, a former walk-on in the country that has as interesting and as unique of a story as Jan Johnson and as successful as a story as Jan Johnson. I can't imagine that there's 8 tight ends in the country that people would choose ahead of Pat Fryermuth. Could there be a couple? Okay, I can live with that. But 8? No. And I love our guys, and I want them to get all the attention that they deserve. Obviously, our focus is on the team and Penn State football, but we are big believers in that, with team success comes individual recognition. I think those 2 guys, deserve it, and I actually think it not only does it hurt them, I think it hurts the awards to not have those guys included. I think they got great stories, and they've earned it. They've earned it. But again, that's coming from the biased head football coach at Penn State. But, in my humble opinion, they both deserve to be a part of that conversation.
Donnie Collins, Scranton Times Tribune.
Hey Donnie, how are you?
Doing very well.
Good.
Ohio State has really moved Chase Young around when they've had him, played with linebacker, played with defensive end. How important is it to pay close attention to what he's doing? And I think how difficult is that for a quarterback or an offensive line to pay a lot of attention to him, given how good everybody else is?
Yeah, obviously, Chase is going to make plays, and that's going to happen. We need to limit the impact that he has in the game, and they're smart, because if you leave him at the same position the entire game, it allows you to have a plan and know where he's going to be with a lot more confidence. Where if you move him around, it makes it a little bit more challenging. But there's no doubt on every play we need to know where he's at and account for him. There's no doubt about it. So we will definitely do that.
Corey Geiger, Altoona Mirror.
Hi, James. How are you?
Good, Corey. How are you?
James, you always seem to choose your words carefully when speaking to the media. After last year's loss to Ohio State, you used the elite word. And I'm just wondering if by any chance, do you have any regrets about making that elite statement, given the undue amount of attention that single word has been focused on?
Would you guys prefer me to not be so strategic and calculated in what I say? Just come in and just talk, wing it? When do you guys enjoy that? Yeah.
I would
Chris would not. Chris would not. That's fair.
Go over to Sandy.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, I think first of all, there's a fine line. There's nothing. I think you guys have gotten to know my personality over years. I think, and Chris tells me all the time I need to be more concise with my answers, but my natural thing is to come in and talk. I'm a relationship person. I'm a person that would rather over-communicate than under-communicate. Ask Scott and Sandy. That's kind of how I'm wired. So I would prefer to do that. But it's not the wise thing to do, as Chris nods her head again. So what I said after that game, I can make arguments both ways. I can make arguments both ways that I'm comfortable and good with what I said. But I could also make the argument there's things that are probably appropriate for me to say in the locker room and behind closed doors that's not appropriate to you guys in the media, because how things can go. It can blow up into something more than what you anticipated it being. But I can make arguments both ways. I don't wake up regretting that. But again, I could probably be a little bit more strategic, which you guys don't want me to be, but probably makes sense. But again, I think the thing I would say is, and this is something I believe very strongly, that we have very high standards and expectations at Penn State, and I think that's a great thing. I think that's a great thing. That's why I came here. That's why recruits come here. That's why we fill up a stadium of 107,000 fans the way we do, where most people across the country, their attendance is going down and ours is going up because people care. So I think that's great. Have I also told you that I look around the country and programs that have not been through anywhere near the adversity that we've been through and are having nowhere near the success that we're having, and it doesn't always necessarily feel like that, or the narrative is not that for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, but all the data backs it up. All the data backs it up. So yeah, I think it's a fine line. But as I've stated before, I'm very proud. I'm not satisfied whatsoever. Trust me, I know our fans aren't either. But I think if everybody would take a deep breath and look at the big picture, everybody should be walking around that's associated with Penn State, the university, the athletic department, the community, and football, and be very, very proud of what our guys do off the field, what our guys do on the field, and maybe most importantly, what they do in the classroom. Should be very proud, because it's very difficult. And just look around. It's very difficult to be successful in all of those areas at the level that we've been.
We'll open up to questions here in the room. Raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
Hey James, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. I wonder how important it is to have two left tackles that you're very comfortable playing, going against the kind of pass rush you're going to see. And do you go into a game thinking you're going to play one guy X amount of snaps and the other X amount of snaps, or is that kind of a feel things the game goes along?
Yeah, so I would actually say we have three. I think Will Fries, who we think is playing at a really high level right now. We think we have three guys that could do it. Yeah, I think it helps. We typically have a plan going in. It hasn't changed a whole lot at the guard position. It hasn't changed a whole lot at the tackle position, where we want to make sure we get Dez at least a series and a half. There's that fine line that you want to make sure those five guys build enough chemistry working together, because they're not five independent contractors. They're one unit that needs to work together and be on the same page. But also Dez has deserved the chance to play, and it also keeps those guys fresh. So I think it's a good mix. Obviously, just like at the running back position, if someone is hot, we have the ability to stick with them. But our rotation on the O-line has been pretty consistent all year long.
Hey James, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. You may have already sort of answered this, but when you're talking about the coverage and some of the breakdowns we've had recently, when you were reviewing the film, how do you differentiate between a trend or an individual isolated mistake that somebody might have made on the play? We talked about the cascade of things that happen when someone makes a mistake. How do you differentiate between the two, and then how do you address if it is a trend?
I think it's the point that you're making. Is it a trend? And a trend is the same mistake showing up again and again, and not a completed pass. This has been completed because this coverage or this player blew the coverage. What I try to get everybody to understand from my perspective is it's like, okay, you got a go ball, and the ball drops right over his shoulder on the outside part of his body, away from the defensive back, and we had tight coverage, and we actually are holding the guy's inside hand, and he catches it. You live with that. You shouldn't overreact to that. You shouldn't freak out. We had great coverage, our guys on scholarship, their guys on scholarship, the quarterback made a big time throw and the guy made a big time catch. And we were squeezing them on the sideline. You live with that. The stuff you can't live with is a blown coverage from an assignment standpoint, or not using the right fundamental or technique, and because we didn't, we get burned for it. And that keeps showing up after we correct it. Where if it's a corner one play who makes a mistake and a safety the next play who makes a mistake in terms of blowing a coverage or a technique and fundamental, and it's different guys, and don't take this the wrong way, it's still got to get fixed. I'm not saying that, but that's the difference between a trend and a good player making a play or different players getting beat and good opponents taking advantage of it. And that's, to me, the difference in the point you're making. Is this a trend when we go back and look at it? I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. We've made some mistakes that we can't make, and we've played good enough opponents that they've taken advantage of it.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
James, I'm wondering, do you think the type of athlete that you guys are able to recruit now has shifted or changed over time, given your success on the field coupled with what Dwight has been able to do?
Yeah, I think, yes, for a lot of reasons. For just how the narrative has changed from when I first got here to now. That's had an impact. Going from, I think, when I got the job, we were averaging like 95,000 or 94,000 fans at games to 106,000. That's had a factor in it. The success that we've had on the field is factored into it. All those things, facilities, there's so many things that factor into it. I will say this, I think we've always, and I've said this before, I think we've always had good players. But now we're getting to the point where we have more depth. Very similar to what we're talking about at running back right now. I mean, I would come in here every week and you guys would be asking me about No King.
We went today, too.
Oh, trust me. No King. But I think what we've also shown this year is when you get in a situation where Noah may not be 100% for whatever reason, you have a lot of confidence in the guys behind. Here's Jeremy Brown now, I think it's rushed for 100 yards, multiple games in a row, and Ricky Slade's doing some really good things, especially in the passing game and Devin Ford and so on and so forth. So I think that's where things have probably changed, is the depth that we're starting to create. Where I think, the next step for us is, there's still some probably dips where some positions don't have the depth that is needed, where there's less of those. But when we first got here, we had good players. We just did not have the depth. And right now, we have more of it, but we need it more consistently across the board.
Hey James, I was wondering how you would assess Clifford's handling of his emotions early in games the past couple of weeks, and how there's an extra emphasis on that this week with the tough environment and the fact that he's playing at home in his home state for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's evolving. When you're a first-time starter, that's very different than being a returning starter or a 3-year starter or whatever it may be. It is, and I think he's kind of gone on this journey where finding the sweet spot of what's right for him. Some guys need to be really emotional and play with that edge and that chip. Other guys are going to be calm, cool, and collected, and other guys are going to be there in between, and that's different for everybody. And I think Sean's been on that journey this year, finding that sweet spot for himself. This week and the emotions, I don't see it a whole lot different. I do think him going on the road to Iowa and having success helps him. I think going on the road to Minnesota and not having success, handled the right way, helps him. And then the most important thing is, you know, he played in a state championship game in that stadium, so that there's nothing that gets you more prepared. It's gonna be a very similar environment to that, right? No. Yeah, for me to sit here and say I'm gonna be able to prepare Sean for, you know, what it's gonna be like exactly, no, but we're gonna do everything in our power to get him ready for what it's gonna be like. But I do think the Iowa, the Minnesota helps. But again, 102,000 is a little bit different.
Since you raised Kane,
Hi, Neil.
hi James. You were forthcoming about Hamler. Is there optimistic about Kane this week?
Yeah, I actually think we could have, I think I said this to you guys, I think we could have played him last week, but it just didn't make sense based on the health that we have with those, other three guys. Obviously, every week that goes by that he doesn't play, the likelihood and the chances of him being closer to 100%, happen. So yeah, we're hopeful. We were hopeful last week, but when I talked to you guys like on a Tuesday and I haven't really seen them practice, we kind of see how it goes. And again, by the end of the week, again, it just didn't make sense based on what we saw. And also, I think it also factors in where I'm trying to explain to you guys as well is if Noah Kane was a returning starter in year 3, you may let him go without practicing all week because of the amount of football he's played. But at this point, I don't know if you necessarily do that. So my point is my answer may be the same, but based on a young man's experience, that could impact it too. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Also, I was curious, have you seen enough of a pattern with the noon start these last couple and also Pitt? Obviously, this is a big window. Anything to alter the approach or enough to raise a concern that you guys haven't been what you want to be during these noon starts these last couple weeks?
Again, it's a question that somewhat is a statement, but we've been pretty good. I think we've been pretty good, but we're not adjusting anything. There's no concern. We played really good opponents, and we found a way to win 9 out of the 10. We want to win them all. I get it, but nothing that we're changing. If that's what you're saying.
Well, it was a question.
Okay,
Just for the record, there was a question mark at the end of it.
Yeah, all of them are technically questions. I mean, you can put a question mark, or you can kind of at the end of it kind of go up without making a question. But I wouldn't necessarily say that. No, again, to sit here and say that changes need to be made, based on the success that we've had this year, I don't know if I necessarily feel the way you do. We look at everything, night games, afternoon games, mid-afternoon games, and make adjustments when we think it is necessary. I think one of the biggest things that we have to make sure that we're doing is how do we get our guys prepared the best to play the games that we've played week in and week out, opponent after opponent. And again, we've played as tough of a stretch as anybody in the country. So that's the most important thing, to me, not necessarily the time of the game. And the last thing I want to say too is, I think the first time we played one of these games, I said something in here. You guys all knew I was kidding when I said about the 12 o'clock game, and they just put the quote out with anybody watching it, like people just went berserk, like about the 12 o'clock game. When everybody in this room clearly knew I was joking, but then the quote goes out in black and white, and no one watches the press conference. Then it's interpreted very differently. Like, I can't believe it. Why would you say that?
Hey, James.
Hey, Mike.
Have you seen enough from Ryan Day to see if there's a significant difference the way he coaches than Urban?
Yeah, I think a sample size at this point is still relatively small. But obviously, you look at Ryan's career. I don't want to sit here and say like I know, but if I had to guess from my perspective, the two biggest influences probably in his career is Chip Kelly and probably Urban. And Ryan had a lot of success before coming to Ohio State, and obviously, he's fortunate to take over a really good program at a point in time where it was healthy and thriving. So why would you change a whole lot? Specifically when his handprints were already all over the offense. So I think the biggest change is probably the personnel change, staff changes that he made when he got the job. They're probably the most different on the defensive side of the ball in terms of scheme. But besides that, I think special teams are very similar. The offense is obviously the same because he was running it the last couple of years, so the defense is different. How they recruit, where they were as a program, all those types of things. I think it's similar, and why wouldn't it be? Obviously, because he took over a program that was already in a pretty strong position. So you see his fingerprints on the program. There's no doubt about it. But the biggest change I'd say is on the defensive side of the ball.
Hey James, how are you?
Good, Hunter.
Good. Speaking with Mike at the post game on Saturday, he was kind of looking back a little bit at the development of that 18 class and him and Fields spending time in the same group and some of the what ifs that you can think about as a head coach and was so day by day detailed in that process. And is it ever hard to shake off some of those years down the road when the kid's on the opposing sideline and he's obviously a problem as a matchup? Is it hard to shake some of those feelings from the recruiting process?
Yeah. The losses on the field are hard to shake. The losses in recruiting are hard to shake because you put so much into it. There's no doubt about it, and that's where my conversations with the administration about competing for everything, because when you lose a recruit, you want to know why. And when you find out what those whys are, you want to try to eliminate them as much as you possibly can. When you have losses on the field, you're trying to figure out what those whys are. And that's what you work so hard during the week to try to eliminate those things. But it's it's competing year round. I think that's where the football thing is maybe different. Is the level of competition year-round for everything at the level of where we're at, and the expectations and standards are where we're at. You have to be willing to compete in every single area and every single thing. So yeah, it definitely bothers you. And your point is a good one. It's magnified when you lose someone and they go somewhere else in the conference, and now you have to compete against that guy for 3 or 4 years. So I guess it's really no different than if he goes anywhere else, but it's in your face. It's more obvious.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
No complaints. How does the anatomy of a game plan change when you're playing a team that you said might be the most talented roster you've had versus some team that falls on the other end of that scale?
Yeah. So, again, trying to be strategic here, because I don't want to say anything that gives things away to what we're going to be doing on Saturday, if that makes sense. But basically, you look at the things that they do well, and one of two things: how do you limit, the impact of what they do well, whether it's personnel or scheme, but also what do they do well that also could put them in jeopardy or at risk, and how can you use that against them, whether someone's overly aggressive, whether someone is not aggressive enough. You're looking at those things, and the combination of those things that you see on film from them, and then knowing who you are and what you're capable of taking advantage of, that's that's where those things factor. I think that one of the worst things that people do is they play a really talented team or a really talented roster, and you play conservatively, and you can't do that. I mean, we're going to have to go there. We're going to have to match their confidence, and we're going to have to match their playmaking. And matching their playmaking isn't just taking shots down the field and things like that. It's you're carrying the ball as a runner, as a running back, or as a receiver, and they come up to make a tackle, and they've made that tackle in the 9 or 10 previous games, and you break that tackle and go for 40, that sends a message. You've made that tackle for 10 straight weeks, you can make that tackle this week. You got to be able to match those things. They bring a pressure that they've had a lot of success getting home on. We're able to slide and pick it up, and now take advantage of when they blitz, they vacated a zone or left someone one-on-one, and then you got to capitalize on it. Same thing on defense. For us to sit here and expect that Ohio State isn't going to make plays on Saturday, they're going to. So don't be shocked by that. And I'm not just talking to you guys. I'm talking to like my team. That's going to be my message to the team. Like, they're going to make plays. We got to match them, and it needs to be one of those type of games, like a heavyweight fight. That guy delivers a blow, and you counter, and that's what it's gonna need to be.
Time for one more.
James, on the depth chart, Justin Shorter moved around a little bit on your depth chart. What's maybe behind that, or is it just trying to maybe get him involved more in the flow of the game, or is it just not?
No, I think what I try to do is, again, on Tuesdays, sometimes we put a depth chart out, and it's early in the week. And, we want to go through that week and see how things play out, who we feel like gives us the best chance to be successful, and where they are on the depth chart in terms of first team, second team, third team, but also the position that they're at. And a lot of times, I don't know that on Tuesday. So with that, I think that's exactly how we ended up playing it last week. So that's typically what I'll try to do, is I'll try to come in and say, okay, this is actually how it was last week. And we're anticipating doing that again, but again, the week will play out, and come Saturday, we'll have those discussions on Friday, and then finalize them on Saturday, and then go out and do them.
Thank you, Coach.